Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be speaking at the summit today for Audrey. And I'm Heidi Villegas with Healing Harvest Homestead and also the School of Botanical Arts and Sciences. That's our online school where we teach herbalism and aromatherapy and natural living, among other things like homesteading. So anyhow, today I'm going to be sharing with you information about just some beginning herbs that you can use and grow in your garden and how to grow them. So we're going to be talking through 20 different herbs, and this is just going to be a high-level overview, but I'm going to share with you the medicinal actions of these herbs, and then we'll talk a little bit about growing each one of them. And at the end, I have a special offer for you. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and get the slide deck up here. All right, so we're going to talk about these 20 easy medicinal herbs to grow in your healing garden. I know I'm a gardener. I love gardening, and we grow quite a lot of our own vegetables every year, but we grow a ton of medicinal herbs because I'm an herbalist, and that's my most favorite thing in the whole world. I love my medicinal herb gardens. At this point, we can literally either grow where I'm cultivating, between those that I'm cultivating and those that I can go out and forage, over 120 medicinal herbs or herbs with medicinal properties. So it's really exciting. When you guys get started with your gardens, hopefully you'll throw some of these herbs I'm going to share with you into your garden plots and enjoy them. You can even grow many of them among your vegetables. All right, so first off, there's a lot of medicinal herbs. There are thousands of medicinal herbs. In fact, many of the herbs that you first of all just consider to be culinary herbs or tea herbs are actually, they have medicinal properties and they can help your body. But today we're going to focus on just 20 of these, and these are all herbs that are easy to grow. I chose them for easiness to grow. They're also easy to either forage or purchase in case you can't or don't want to grow them. And they all have multiple different purposes or uses. So that makes these, I love growing multi-use herbs because then, if you know how to use the herb, you can use it for a number of different things, especially if you have a small yard and you're gardening on a small plot. It's nice to have multi-use herbs in your garden. So first off is calendula. This is Calendula officinalis is the Latin name. And medicinally speaking, it's amazing. I love this flower. First off, it's beautiful and it's just cheerful every summer. It's full of resin, and the resin compound is the medicinal part of the plant. So you'll notice if you grow calendula, which is really easy to grow, when you grow to pick the flower head, and that's the part you're going to harvest, it'll be sticky, and that's because of the resin. So just know that if you have a very sticky flower, then that's good. Anyhow, calendula is very, very healing to the skin. It also strengthens the skin. It's known as a vulnerary herb, and what that means is that it heals wounds very quickly too. It's wonderful in herbal infused oils, and with that herbal infused oil, you can use that in soaps and in salves and in a number of other body products, even lotions. In fact, on my website, I have a really great recipe for a calendula lotion that you can go check out if you like. My website's healingharvesthomestead.com. Calendula is edible, so you can just toss the flower heads into salads or things like that. It is a bitter herb, I have to warn you. So if you're going to try to consume it in a salad, just know that it's a bitter. And what that is actually going to do in terms of your health is improve your digestion. Bitter herbs are exceptional for getting the digestive process going and keeping it going smoothly. And if you have an ulcer, calendula is one of my favorites to use because it is, once again, it's healing to tissues, and then it's also really nice for your digestive system. So that's a little bit about calendula. This is a plant that literally I could go on and on about for a long time. In fact, I just want to say many of these plants are in their plant master classes in our membership, which is the Confident Herbalist tribe. And we go very deeply into the research and very, very in depth on how to use these different plants, and also provide lots of recipes and remedies and formulations too. Calendula is one of them. as many of these are that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So growing tips, it's often named the pot marigold, and that's because you can grow it in pots. Now, people get confused because they hear the name pot marigold, or some people refer to calendula as marigold, but it's not a true marigold. Its genus name is calendula, and it's not tagetes, so it's a different plant. Growing tips. What I like to do when I plant my calendula seed, and I just direct seed, is slightly disturb the soil. And the seeds are kind of large and funky looking. They look like little lizards. And I just toss them out on the soil and be sure that they're, spread out pretty well. Take a fork and then I just lightly cover them and then I water them. And they grow like crazy. They're just wonderful. They love full sun. They can take a little bit of shade too, and they like well-drained soil. So you don't want them to have soggy feet. I actually grew calendula in the Southern Nevada mountains when we lived off grid, and they did great in that dry, rocky mountain soil. As long as I kept them watered, they were super happy out there, and it was not good soil. All right, the next one up, this is number 2, is cayenne. This is Capsicum annum, or we just know it as cayenne pepper. I love this plant. First off, it's wonderful for cooking, but in terms of your health, it's incredible. One of its big actions or primary actions is for supporting the circulatory system. So it's known as a dispersive circulatory helper, which means that if you take cayenne tincture or even drink it in a tea, it actually moves heat because it's moving the circulation in your body. It's enhancing your blood flow, but it gets warmth to your extremities. So if you're working with an elderly person or a person with cold, circulation or cold hands and feet, cayenne pepper is a really nice one to use. It can also be used to help stop bleeding. It is an amazing styptic herb, and a styptic or a hemostat is what they're also called, stops bleeding and clots it. I have actually gotten some really deep cuts, and I just keep cayenne powder on hand all the time. And my husband and I just put that cayenne powder right on the cut, and it stops the bleeding. Now, I know that probably sounds like, ouch. Why would you want to put a hot pepper powder on a cut? Well, on top of it being wonderful as a styptic, cayenne pepper is also an anti-nociceptive herb. And what that means is that it's numbing. So if you feel pain at the surface of the skin and you put on a little bit of cayenne pepper, it's going to numb it. It's actually really helpful in terms of shingles and, the cold sores and things like that for the same reasons. It's really wonderful. Cayenne pepper is so powerful that it's been known to help slow or to stop a heart attack. And that's with the tincture. You'd give a good amount of the tincture to a person, and that might be helpful until you can get them to a hospital. So yes, cayenne pepper is fabulous, just a fabulous plant to grow in your garden, besides how wonderful it is in your cooking. So growing tips, it is a perennial herb in zones 9 through 11. So in very warm areas of the country, it's considered a perennial. Otherwise, it's an annual. It does not like freezes or even cold weather at all. I have found that when we grow ours, we're up in North Idaho. Once the temperature starts dipping into the low 40s or the upper 30s, my cayenne pepper is like not doing too well. It likes moist but well-drained, very fertile soil and lots of sunshine. One year I planted it next to my tomatoes, and my tomatoes grew so tall, and they actually shaded my cayenne, and they didn't do well that year. That was quite a while ago. So I learned that I need to dedicate a nice spot to my cayenne or keep it on the edge of a bed so that it gets plenty of sun. You can start your cayenne peppers indoors 8 to 10 weeks early. And then when you get nice little plants, your seedlings, you can space them out about a foot apart. Now, I know some people will say, no, they need about 18 inches to 2 feet, but I have found that spacing them, I would even say 9 inches to 12 inches or a foot gives them it's a nice space. And I know one gardener that I listen to, she's really a fan of packing them in. So I just like, I have found over the years, that's a nice space for my cayenne peppers. Okay, let's talk chamomile. This is German chamomile, Matricaria recitata. It is the most common to grow here in North America. There's also Roman chamomile, that's another species, but German chamomile is what you're normally going to find. And medicinally, chamomile is incredible. You probably know of it as a sleep aid, right? Drink your chamomile tea, helps you to relax and get to sleep. And it is wonderful for that. But it's because it's a nervine herb, and a nervine herb is any herb that acts on the nervous system in some way. And in terms of chamomile, it is a relaxing nervine herb, and it's even mildly sedative for some people. It's a wonderful anti-inflammatory herb, and it's also a pain reliever, and it's wonderful for arthritis. So I'm an herbalist. I'm also an aromatherapist. One of my very, very favorite ingredients to use in formulations for arthritis and like joint pain is German chamomile essential oil. And that's because it contains chamazoline, which is very anti-inflammatory, and also B-caryophyllene, and that is another anti-inflammatory. So it's really helpful for this. It's a wonderful digestive herb, so you can, like I said, drink it in a tea, or the flowers are edible, and it helps with colic. If you've got a little baby with colic, and especially if the mom is nursing or breastfeeding, have the mom drink some chamomile tea about 30 minutes before nursing, and that's going to help the baby. So these are things that common folk knowledge that used to be well known and has disappeared in the last like 150 to 200 years from common knowledge. And it really makes me upset because I know I had my first son was colicky, and I cried and cried, and he cried and cried, and it was like I didn't know what to do because I didn't know herbalism back then. Now I'm a 60-year-old grandma, and I know what to do. And it just makes me really upset because if I had known all this knowledge back then when I was a young mom, oh my goodness, my children and myself, we could have been so much happier in many different ways. Anyway, chamomile is also excellent for skincare. It's a really nice product or herb to put in your lotions and your salves and your oils. It's also great for anti-itching. For people with eczema, it can be very calming and soothing, especially if you want to combine some chamomile with some calendula and then add in some honey and some really finely powdered oats or colloidal oats, then that makes a really nice anti-itch, soothing. You can just use it as a powder, or you can create a salve with it, and it's really helpful. I have a recipe on my website for an anti-itch salve that you might like. Eye care, it's really great for soothing conjunctivitis or calming, oozing, like if you've got, the crusty eyes and things like that, chamomile can be a really nice eye wash. And then it's also helpful for fevers. Chamomile is one of those herbs that you would want to use with a hot fever. It tends to cool things down quite a bit. I've spent kind of a lot of time on chamomile, so I'll move on here. Chamomile prefers a cooler climate. It doesn't like a lot of heat. It's usually ready to harvest in about 10 to 12 weeks, so it takes a good chunk of time for the flowers to sprout up, but it reseeds very, very easily. Once you get a patch of chamomile growing, it will pop back up year after year as long as the soil isn't disturbed too much. And the seeds are teeny, teeny, tiny. They like well-drained, neutral soil and quite a bit of sunshine, 4 to 6 hours of sunshine or more. Next up is chickweed. This is Stellaria media, and chickweed is one of the premier springtime herbs. It's actually a weed that pops up in the spring in many different places, and you can see the little flower petal. This is an indicator of how you can identify it, but there are 5 petals and they're double lobed, so you can see how that looks here in the picture. Medicinally, chickweed supports liver and kidney health very strongly. It's one of those spring herbs that is known as a detoxifier. So a lot of people drink the tea or even tincture it. Now, I want to warn you, if you're going to tincture your herbs, you're not going to get the mineral content in the alcohol because the minerals are not soluble in alcohol. But if you drink the tea, you will, and it'll be very, very nutritious for the body. Chickweed is good for rashes, eczema, and dry skin. It's good for detoxification and it's edible. It's a wonderful one just to toss in your salads. And it supports kidney and urinary health, all, just general urinary health in terms of the bladder and the urethra, everything. And it's a springtime herb. It tends to disappear in the summer times when it gets really hot. It likes the cool spring weather. Growing tips. It likes moist, cultivated soils. It's a great cover crop if you want to just sprinkle the seed out in the fall and it'll come up in the spring. What I like to do is mix the seeds in with sand because they're really super tiny, and then you get a more even cover if you're going to use it as a cover crop. And then these are one of the first spring herbs to emerge, along with others like cleavers is another one, and dandelion. These wonderful springtime herbs are all detoxifiers, and it tends to grow in clumps. Here's dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, and dandelion, I love it. It's such a great plant. I know that in the suburbs of cities, it's really disliked and people try to kill it. But to be honest, if you have dandelion growing, please encourage it. It's really a wonderful plant. The entire plant is useful from the roots all the way up to the flower. It's edible. The spring leaves are amazing in salads, and they're known as another bitter herb. So they're great for digestion. The root is exceptional for liver health. And if you roast the root, if you want to harvest it, chop it up and roast it, you've got a really great coffee substitute. It's delicious. And the leaves support kidney and urinary health. The flowers are incredible. They tend to support skin care and the health of the skin. That's because they are really high in a chemical called allantoin, and they are just wonderful. In fact, on my website or on my YouTube channel, I do have a dandelion lotion recipe that's out of this world. So it's a real lotion. I teach you how to make lotion in that video. Dandelion is edible. It can be added to teas, coffees, and salads, among many other things. I've actually, when I make bone broth, we do a lot of homemade bone broth here on the homestead, and I'll just gather my dandelions and I'll just pull them up by the roots, clean them real good, and I'll just throw them into the bone broth, the whole plant. And it's wonderful. But dandelion purifies the blood and also supports the liver and other organs of detoxification. And if you're wondering about your organs of detoxification, in air quotes, everybody wants to go on a detox cleanse, right? In the springtime. That's not necessary. And the reason is because our body is detoxing all the time. That's what these detoxification organs do. What we need to do is support their health over a long period of time. And then our bodies are going to just stay clean. And those organs include the liver, the kidneys, the skin, the lungs. Those are the main detoxification organs. All right, growing tips for dandelion. Sprinkle the seed and water it. Honestly, that's pretty much all you have to do. It grows, it just loves people. It grows everywhere. It likes cooler weather. You should probably sow seeds into the soil after the last frost if you're planting it in the springtime. But it is a spring herb, and sometimes in some areas it will flower again in the fall. It tends to stop flowering in the summer, and the leaves become very, very tough and bitter in the summer too. The summertime's not the best time to harvest it. You would harvest the roots in the fall as well. Dandelion can grow indoors, and it will flower in about 2 months, and it loves disturbed soils. All right, here's feverfew. This is Tanacetum parthenium. It's really a fun plant to grow. It can grow to be about, almost 4 feet tall in clumps. And it's reseeds really easily. When we're talking about easy reseeders, this is one that spreads the seeds, spreads the love. And it's quite invasive in some areas. So I suggest that you find a corner or a place in your garden. It's a beautiful plant, by the way, but I would choose a spot and just know that you're going to get little plants spread around, especially if you've got a little bit of wind, and be good with that. So you probably don't want to plant this one near your vegetables because you're going to have a lot of feverfew to weed out. But feverfew is one of my favorites to be sure I have. It helps with fevers and it helps with migraine headaches. If you have a person or in your family or maybe yourself and you suffer from migraines, it's really a great plant. You can use it all by itself for migraine headaches, and it's going to be very supportive. But I really like this blend I'm going to share with you here. If you use equal parts feverfew, spearmint leaves, and lemon balm leaves, you're really going to have a beautiful tonic combination, and you can take that tea or tincture every single day. It really supports the nervous system well. Feverfew is wonderful for minor bug bites and pain relief. So it germinates pretty quickly, 10 to 15 days. It does require light to germinate. I like to start my feverfew indoors. You want to plant it out after the last frost, and it really likes moist soil. I know where I had it, where it just exploded, that area was always wet. I just could not, it just would not dry out, and my feverfew loved it. It can be invasive. We mentioned that. And it really does nicely in some partial shade. So if you have an area of your garden where you have some shade and you want to plant it there, if it's dappled shade, like from, under a tree, and so if it's not too dark, but it's getting a little light, it'll do pretty well in a situation like that. All right, next up is garlic. This is Allium sativum, and medicinal properties. Oh my goodness, you guys, the garlic masterclass inside the Confident Herbalist tribe in our School of Botanical Arts and Sciences, the text for that masterclass is like 80 pages long. And that's because there's so much wonderful research about all the things that garlic does. This slide does not do it even a bit of justice at all. It's an amazing plant. And if there is any plant that you should always have available to you in your home, it's garlic. So it's been used for over 5,000 years medicinally. It's wonderful for colds, flu, sore throats, and it helps digestion as well. It's a wonderful antiviral. So in terms of even prevention, eat a clove of garlic a day. It's really going to be helpful to you. It helps the circulatory system and heart health. In fact, it's well known to help support people with hypertension. So, you can get a supplement for that, but you can eat your garlic too. It does thin the blood, so people on blood thinners need to be a little careful with having too much of it. So that's one where you'd want to talk to your doctor and all of that. Garlic is an antiseptic, it's an antiviral, it's an antibacterial, and it's a vermifuge. It's also a skin healing herb. It's really great. A vermifuge herb is one that's anti-parasitic. So when you go to deworm your animals, garlic is good for them. I mean, a lot of people will say, garlic's going to kill your dogs. Well, actually, no, it won't, not in the proper amounts. And if you look at natural deworming formulas, one of my favorites is Molly's by Molly's Herbals. You can look them up. She has a wonderful protocol for worms in 2 stages. And I think garlic might be in both of the stages. It's in at least one. And it's for all animals. It's really a great formula. So growing tips. Garlic grows from a single clove. So you've got the bulb, right? And then you've got the little cloves inside the bulb, and you can see them in that picture. One clove is just one of that, like that one little clove that's hanging off to the side. So you're going to plant that with the root part down and the tip pointed upward in the late fall after a hard frost. It likes to go dormant during the winter, but that dormancy gives the roots time to get going. It likes about 10 weeks of cold. You want to use hard neck varieties in the north and soft neck in the south. Okay, those varieties just do better wherever you're at. And if you're in the middle, you're great. You can use both. And garlic does like well-drained soil. Now we're on to ginger. This is Gingiber officinale, and it's a wonderful plant. Many of these herbs that I'm talking with you about have essential oil that goes along as well. And you can actually distill some of these in your own home and make hydrosols, which are also very powerful and wonderful. And hydrosols are great for little animals and children, as well as just for adults, for general skincare and things like that. Medicinally, ginger's like garlic. It's another master class that we have, and the text is also huge on this one. I could go on and on and on about ginger, but in a nutshell, it is stimulating, it's anti-inflammatory, and it's a decongestant. So it tends to just get things moving in the body. I really love using ginger essential oil, along with, I mentioned German chamomile before, and some peppermint on sore situations. It really works great. Ginger and peppermint together kind of act a little bit like icy hot. So it's really kind of nice. It's expectorating, so it helps to clear mucus out of the lungs, and it supports general healing. You take ginger, it's just going to help whatever you need. It's supportive of warmth. So if you're a cold person, ginger is great, and it supports healthy circulation. It's also like stimulating to the circulation. Cayenne and garlic are, and it's really helpful for digestion. It's one of my favorites for soothing tummy aches and things like that. It works great for flatulence and also nausea and digestive support. If you have a child with motion sickness, if you take a little nickel of clove or cut it so that it's the child's size and just have them tuck it into the cheek, that can be really helpful for car sickness. All right, growing tips. Ginger is a southern plant. It grows really well in Florida, actually, right out in the garden, or even like places like Louisiana, way down south. But when we get to areas like up here in the north, I have to grow mine inside. But it can be grown inside or outside, depending on where you're at. It grows from the rhizome. The rhizome is actually, a lot of people think it's a root. It's not really a root. It's actually part of the stem that's underground. So that is the definition of a rhizome. And that's the part that the ginger will grow from. You need to water it regularly and keep the soil moist. It does need time to grow. It needs kind of a long, extended time period to mature and actually grow more rhizomes under the soil. Once the leaves of the plant begin to die off, that's when you want to dig up the rhizomes, and you can clean them off and enjoy them. And they're really wonderful fresh. Okay, now we're on to lavender. This is Lavandula angustifolia. And this is one of, everybody loves lavender. Well, not everybody, but I haven't met very many people who don't. Lavender, just like chamomile, is a calming, nervine herb. So it affects the nervous system in a really good way. It's not quite as sedative as chamomile. And I really like it if I'm working with children who are really overactive and you just want to calm them down, but not knock them out. I always start with lavender. My next one up would be the chamomile. Lavender is great for wounds and bug bites. It's soothing for irritated skin. It's another one that works quite well with eczema situations. And lavender is really nice for cognitive health. I consider it a nootropic herb. There have been several clinical studies on Alzheimer's patients and lavender essential oil with positive results. So more and more studies are happening, but lavender is wonderful. It's great for pregnant women, especially in the labor room. And studies have been conducted in the labor room as well. And women who are able to diffuse lavender or maybe have lotion and be able to smell it, on their hands, are calmer and do better in the labor and delivery room. Lavender is a wonderful helper for the respiratory system. And there, again, this is another herb. There's so much more that you can talk about with lavender, but these are the highlights. All right, here's some growing tips for lavender. It loves full sun and well-drained soil. It does not require much fertilization at all. It's really an easy keeper once it matures. You want to plant it 1 to 3 feet apart. And I have a friend who's got a lavender farm, and I think she's planting hers about 2 feet or so apart, at least. You want to water them well and then back off on the watering. Lavender's a Mediterranean plant, so it definitely likes soil that dries out in between waterings. It grows really well in zones 5 through 8. And then you want to harvest your lavender, you want to cut the stems right as the flowers begin to bud. So once they've budded out, they lose a lot of their aromatics, and the aromatics are the medicinal part of that plant. The leaves also contain the volatile compounds too, but not as much as the flowers. Let's talk about lemon balm. This is Melissa officinalis, and many people just adore this plant. So lemon balm contains a chemical called citral, and that's what makes it taste lemony. And it's also gives it its medicinal powers. It's a relaxing nervine, very gentle one. It gently calms and soothes, and it's one of my favorites for children, but it also supports the entire nervous system, okay? Central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Lemon balm is great. It's helpful for migraines, especially if stress is a trigger. It's an antiviral. Specifically, it targets the herpes family of viruses, and those are your cold sores, your shingles, chickenpox, genital herpes, any of the herpes family. Lemon balm goes to work and can shorten the duration and hasten the recovery of the sores, as well as reduce the pain. It's pretty amazing. In fact, on my website, you can look there. I have a recipe for a cold sore salve, and it's made with lemon balm and L-lysine, which is a special amino acid that you can easily buy, and it's really effective. Lemon balm just tastes amazing, just beautiful. It's one of my favorite summertime tea plants. Growing tips, it can be invasive. Like most of the mints can be invasive. It's a perennial. It needs 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. It likes well-drained soil. You want to space your lemon balm if you're cultivating it about 18 inches apart. And it's easy to start from seed, or you can just buy seedlings. It's really very, very popular and common. Next up is marshmallow. This is Althea officinalis, and I love marshmallow. And people who are new to medicinal herbs, they often like hear marshmallow, and guess what they think of? They think of the candy. And here's a little story. Marshmallow root is really high in a property called, or a compound called mucilage. It's very, very slimy and jelly-like. And the marshmallow candies were actually made of marshmallow root way back in the day. That's where they came from. And then the food industry came in and basically added a bunch of garbage and made it super cheap to make these nasty marshmallows we have in the store today. They're nothing like the real ones. I've made marshmallows with marshmallow root. In fact, the recipe's in the Marshmallow Masterclass inside the tribe. And oh my goodness, they're so good. Way, way different than eating the store-bought ones. It's a different animal. Anyway, medicinally, marshmallow is very, very, we call it demulcent in the herbal world, but it means moisturizing, very soothing to the tissues, especially the mucous membranes. We have mucous membranes throughout our entire body, starting in our mouth or in our eyes. They're down our entire GI tract, from our esophagus all the way down to the outputs, and everywhere. And mucous membranes like moisture, and marshmallow can be helpful for that, for people who tend to run dry. If you've got dry skin, even marshmallow tea added to your teas can be really helpful. It's very soothing for inflammation in various body systems, and it supports the immune system and the lymphatic system by just helping move the lymph. and it's in blends. It's very, very excellent to offset the more drying herbal actions. So sometimes an herbalist will say, hey, why don't you try some sage tea? And that's going to help that sore throat and kind of dry out a wet respiratory condition. This is an example. Well, oftentimes, knowing that sage is so drying and so is golden seal and a number of other herbs like this that affect the lungs, we might say, let's add a little bit of marshmallow leaf in there too. And that helps to offset the drying factor while letting the active herb do its job without harming the body too much. So it's really interesting. If you're going to make a marshmallow herbal tea, just putting the plant matter in some cold water works, and just let it sit there, and you're going to get some of that mucilage, and then you can enjoy it. It's really quite tasty. And many herbalists will say, no, you can't tincture marshmallow. Well, you can. I've done it many, many times. It's quite effective. The key is you want to have low proof alcohol, because the mucilage in marshmallow doesn't like alcohol and it won't extract really well. But you can tincture it in 80 proof and it works fine. And the whole plant is useful, the entire plant, from roots, flowers, everything. In fact, the flowers are beautiful in salads. Marshmallow grows naturally. I put here almost everywhere, but it really doesn't grow naturally almost everywhere. It does not grow in desert areas. It does not grow in really dry areas. But if you've got an area that's wet, then you might find marshmallow growing there. And if you don't, you can cultivate it. I've cultivated it in many, many different places. It likes a lot of moisture. It's a perennial and it enjoys full sun. It does well in zones 3 through 9. So it's got a really broad range of growth. You can cut it down to about a foot to winterize it. And then deadheading the flowers encourages more growth of the flowers. I want to just say here that marshmallow is in the mallow family, Malvaceae, and it's a relative of the hollyhock. So if you have hollyhocks growing, you can use them interchangeably. Hollyhock has many of the same constituents as marshmallow. All right, we're on to mullein. This is Verbascum thapsus, and this was one of the very first medicinal plants that I ever worked with. And we lived down in southern Nevada at the time. That picture is actually of me back in the day up in the mountains harvesting a beautiful stalk of mullein. That was a long time ago. Wish I still looked like that. Anyway, mullein is amazing. It's a plant that is supreme when it comes to the respiratory system. It happens to be not only an expectorant, but it also soothes and calms the lungs when there's spasms and things like that. It's just goes to work on the lungs and is really helpful. Not only that, it helps with the upper respiratory system too. It definitely calms sinuses and soothes the flow of air from upper to lower. Really nice. It's helpful for allergies, congestion, symptoms of cold and flu, coughing. It's really great. It's very gentle too. Mullein is a very, very safe herb, and you can really take a lot of it and not be harmed. It's just really nice for when you've got respiratory issues. It is also supportive of the kidneys and the urinary system. It supports a healthy musculoskeletal system. And the little flowers, and if you look at that picture there at the top of that stalk, you can see the little yellow flowers. They kind of pop out of the stalk like little popcorns. They're really fun. But if you can gather a lot of those, let them dry a little bit, and then put them in some oil and infuse them. But that combination is really helpful for people who get ear pains or have issues with the ears or get an ear infection. You can also combine it with some garlic. Now, I just want to say, I know a lot of people say, yes, you can put oil in the ears. And I say, no, don't put oil in your ears. I would not do that. So what I do is if I have ear issues, I'll rub the oil around the panicle of the ear and maybe right around the outside of the opening, and then all over around the ear itself, and then the neck. And that usually tends to really be helpful. There's quite a few species of mullein, and nearly all of them are medicinal and interchangeable. So mullein likes full sun with enough water. You don't have to overwater it or anything, but what it really loves is disturbed soils. If you're in an area like I am where there's logging going on, you can go up into the mountains, and in the areas where the trees have been logged, mullein comes up like crazy. It's like a field of mullein. And in these areas, and then they go back and the companies will replant the trees, and you'll have about a 5-year period of tons of mullein, and then the trees are too tall. So it's kind of interesting. The seeds of mullein are really, really small, and they do tend to grow pretty easily in the right conditions. The leaves can be harvested in both the first and second year, but you want to be sure that you've got proper identification that first year. They grow in a basal rosette. And that first year, it's just kind of low to the ground, like a little clump. There's no stalk. That stalk that you see in that picture there, that is the second year. It's a biennial plant. And it's really easy to identify that second year. But the first year, it's easy to misidentify. And a couple of plants that you might misidentify are comfrey, also foxglove. And foxglove is very, very poisonous. So you just need to be really careful if you're harvesting it in the wild. And just always be careful if you're foraging and harvesting plants. All right, this is oregano. That's dried oregano right there. Medicinal properties, it is antiviral, antibiotic, antifungal. It's high in antioxidants. It's really got a lot of great nutritional benefits for the body. It's one of our cooking herbs, as you know. If you like pizza, you've probably tasted oregano. It's an herb that's wonderful in herbal steams. I do have an herbal steam guide that's free. I'll see if I can get it added to this for you guys, but it's really great. And anytime you get congestion or are feeling under the weather, an herbal steam can really open things up and just help things get better really fast. It's also really good for your skin. Anyway, oregano is good for infections. It's helpful for skin infections specifically and generalized skin care. And it's really wonderful for the digestive system. You can make tinctures, infused oils. Essential oil is also comes from oregano, and obviously food. It's another herb that's called a vermifuge, and that means that it's really helpful for worms. It loves the sun. It grows in zones 4 to 11. It tends to spread pretty easily. It grows about 2 feet tall and about 18 inches wide, and it's kind of clumping. And you want to harvest it before it flowers. Now, if you miss that window, go ahead and harvest it, even if it's flowering. But if you can, get out there and get it harvested before flowering. The medicinal properties are a little more intense before it flowers. Then here's peppermint, Mentha ex peperita. The X indicates that it's a hybrid, and I think it's very interesting. It's a cross between spearmint and watermint. Medicinally, it's wonderful for the digestion. If you've got bloating or flatulence, it kind of just makes it go away. It just soothes the intestinal tract. It's anti-inflammatory. It's pain relieving to muscles and joints. It's antispasmodic. It's one of the essential oils I actually love to use if I'm working with young women who have a lot of cramping during their menstrual cycle. The tea can also be helpful too, especially with the digestive system. It's great for fevers. It's very cooling, and you can do a peppermint compress across the forehead, really be helpful for a hot fever. It's helpful for the respiratory system, and that's because it's high in menthol. And then this is another plant that's really nice in herbal steams. First off, it smells good. And second of all, it really opens up the respiratory passages. You've all heard, always grow your peppermint in pots. Keep them contained. And that's because peppermint does spread via seeds and also runners. And so it can grow pretty much anywhere. It likes to take over an area if it's a good area for it to grow. It can be really invasive and hard to get rid of. It grows in zones 5 to 9 primarily with some shade. I'm pretty sure it grows up in zone 4 too. And I have a friend up there and she grows everything. And again, this is one where if you're going to use the leaves as the herb, you want to harvest it before it flowers. It tends to get a little bit bitter after flowering. But if you're going to distill it to make a hydrosol or to yield any essential oil, then you want to harvest it after flowering because there's more of the volatile oils in the leaves at that time. It's kind of interesting. You just really need to start working with the plants and you get to know all these things. All right, this is plantain, not plantain like the little banana from South America. This is plantain. So that's Plantago lanceolata. That's the narrow leaf species. And then there is the broadleaf species, which is Plantago major. And plantain, either of the species, are really helpful for a number of things. They're great for detoxing. They're another springtime herb, but once they get going, they actually spring up all summer long if you have it growing naturally around you. Plantain is very edible. As the leaves grow into the summertime, they get real tough. And you can see how they're separated. The leaf is with the venous area that's really tough. It's very stringy. Plantain is high in mucilage and it's moistening to the skin, so it's really helpful for the skin. Plantain is incredibly wound healing. You can do spit compresses if you need to. They work really wonderfully on bites, stings, sunburns. Very supportive of the liver. I just mentioned detox a minute ago. It's a blood cleanser and it's a pain reliever. I just want to say, a few years ago, I was working in my garden and I disturbed a wasp's nest that was underneath the edge of the bed I was working on. And all of these black wasps flew up out of this nest, and I ran for my life. And I ran to the nearest broadleaf plantain plant that I could find. It was actually probably the only one growing on our property. The rest were the little narrow leaf ones. And I grabbed those leaves and ran into the house. And I had sustained 5 stings. And they hurt so bad. And I just went to work chewing that plantain, and I made my spit poultices and put them on there and changed them out every few minutes or so. And the pain subsided. It was really pretty amazing because I was expecting it to hurt for a long time. Those were big black wasps. They were not the nice little ones, if there are any nice little ones. Okay, growing tips. You might be able to find it growing in the wild and be able to forage it. If so, be sure that the land is clean where you're foraging from. I have an article on my website all about foraging if you want to go read that. But you can cultivate plantain. It's a very low growing perennial herb, so it's going to keep popping back up every year. It grows in rosettes that are about 3 to 12 inches in diameter, depending on the soil conditions and also the species of the plantain. It can grow well in zones 3 through 12. So that's a massively broad range of growth. You can sprinkle the seeds where you want them to grow, and plantain loves full sun, and generally it can grow in all soil types, although it does better in richer soils, I think. It does do fine in dry soils, and the broadleaf species is the easiest to harvest because the leaves are bigger. They're like big and round, really beautiful. All right, next up is rosemary. I love rosemary. Salvia rosmarinus, the synonym Rosmarinus officinalis. The botanists got together a couple of years ago and they decided to change the Latin name of rosemary. And so it used to be called Rosmarinus officinalis, and I still kind of think of it that way. They have decided that it belongs in the Salvia genus. And so now it's a member of the sage family. Medicinally, though, it's delicious. This is a food herb, and it's another Mediterranean herb. It's a culinary aromatic. And you guys, any of the aromatics are going to have medicinal properties for the body. Rosemary is high in antioxidants. It's mildly pain relieving. It's stimulating. It's really great for the circulation and those with low blood pressure. With that said, even those with high blood pressure do well taking rosemary unless they just overdo it, which is really hard to do. Rosemary is a nootropic herb, and that means that it helps with cognitive function and also memory. There have been plenty of studies at this point that prove how able and and efficient rosemary is to help with focus and concentration. It's also helpful for respiratory issues. It contains certain levels of cineol and camphor, depending on where it's grown and the climate. And those two chemicals are really helpful when it comes to respiratory support. So it's just a really excellent herb. It's one I love having around. In fact, I grow it here in North Idaho. I have to bring it in during the winter because it doesn't like the hard freezes or any freezes really. So, and what I have learned, because it really struggled the first year I did that, it's an upside down plant. So it can take in a lot of moisture through its leaves. And so what I learned to do was just mist it every other day, and that helped keep it happy. But it does like a warm and dry climate. And then I think I just talked about all of this. It loves humidity, and it has dry feet. It doesn't like a lot of moisture in the roots. But if you think about where it's native to, it's native to the seaside area of the Mediterranean. It really likes to have that moisture on the leaves. All right, St. John's wort. This is Hypericum perforatum. What a lovely plant this is. If you can grow this, I suggest you try. It's really beautiful. It grows wild in a number of different areas of the United States. It grows here in North Idaho really well. It does not grow down in southern Nevada, but when we lived in the mountains off grid, I cultivated it and it did really well and spread. So you might be able to get it going where you're at. Medicinally, okay, it's got a reputation from the 1990s that it can help with depression. Now, it can. The reason is that St. John's wort is a nervine herb that affects the entire nervous system in positive, supportive ways. And that includes when we start talking about the central nervous system, with our brain, the limbic system is involved. And that's where all the chemicals, and we're not going to go into all the science of that, but they get together and they decide if we're going to be happy or sad. Well, St. John's wort has some pretty powerful impacts on that. So with that said, St. John's wort can interact with prescription drugs, and it's actually one of the herbs that's the highest in herb drug interactions. Those are called HDIs. And so if you're on any kind of mental health prescription drug, it's very likely you cannot use St. John's wort. It would not be indicated. And there are a number of other herbs as well or drugs as well, that should not be taken with St. John's wort. So if you're on prescription meds, you're definitely going to want to check into any drug interacts. St. John's wort, though, if you're not on medications, it's incredible. It helps with neuralgia. It supports the entire nervous system. I had sciatica many years ago I had a compression on two of my discs, and oh my goodness, it caused the worst pain. And St. John's wort, I took it internally as a tincture. I also used it topically on the area, and it was really helpful. St. John's wort also has an affinity for the skin. It quickly heals burns and wounds. So it's really helpful for just general skin health too. It is a perennial. It loves to bloom right at the peak of summer, or when the summer solstice. That it's kind of like the summer solstice comes along where the sun is at its peak in the northern hemisphere, and the flower just blooms open, and there it is for us. It's really beautiful. It loves sunshine, and it can stand a hint of shade if it's in a very hot place. It likes moist, disturbed soils as well, and not wet, but it likes moisture. And it grows really well in zones 3 through 7. And in some states, it's invasive. So you might have to ask if you're allowed to grow it where you live. All right, next up, we're on to thyme. This is Thymus vulgaris. We have all heard of thyme, right? This is just garden thyme. It's beautiful, and it's great for your cooking. It's beautiful in teas. I love infusing it in honey. Oh my goodness, that tastes so good. And then you can use it in your teas, or just take a little bit every day for the medicinal benefits. Thyme is very antiviral. It helps the body to heal more quickly from colds and flus and even coughs. It's a disinfectant, and it's an antiseptic. It's an antioxidant. It's an antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial, antiseptic, and anti-inflammatory. It is anti-everything. in a good way. No, thyme is really wonderful in terms of overall health and just staying healthy. It's great for sore throats and respiratory support. It boosts the mood. Now, there are something called, I just want to talk about this really fast because some plants, especially the mint plants, will have what's known as chemotypes. And generally, when we're just harvesting the herb, the chemotypes aren't that important because there's a whole lot of other constituents there. And we can just count on the fact that certain chemicals like thymol are going to be found in the plant. But when we distill the plant as a hydrosol or as a more strongly an essential oil, then the chemotypes really matter because those come out strongly in the aromatics, in those volatile oils. And they make a difference as to how you're going to use them. So Thymus vulgaris with a chemotype of thymol, which is a specific chemical, is going to be extremely disinfectant, extremely helpful for cleaning the air and getting rid of, germs and bacteria and things. Whereas thyme with a chemotype of linalool, for example, which is the same chemical found in high amounts in lavender, is actually going to be calming and soothing. So when you take the plant and you use the tea, guess what? You're getting the benefits of both, and it's pretty neat. So anyway, that's how it might be mood boosting. It's an excellent digestive. It's great for oral hygiene. It's one of my favorites as mouth rinses. It is winter hardy. It grows in zones 5 through 9. It likes full or part sun. I have found that mine does well with some shade. And there are many hybrids. You've probably heard of lemon thyme and this kind of thyme and that kind of thyme. I personally prefer regular old Thymus vulgaris garden thyme. It is drought tolerant. And that's just because I like to use it for the medicinals. Okay, we're down to just 2 more. Here's valerian. This is Valeriana officinalis. It's such a neat plant. Valerian can grow really tall, like, 4 to 6 feet tall. It's a very, very powerful nervine herb that's quite sedative, but it's safe. It helps with anxiety, pain, sleep, menopause issues, hot flashes, digestion. What a great plant, right? It's really excellent for tension and sore muscles. It's very strong relaxant and antispasmodic in the body. It just tends to relax you. It might keep you awake because there's about 4 to 10% of people who actually have the opposite effect to valerian. So if you're going to try it for sleep or relaxation, you want to do it for the first time on a night before a day where you have nothing going on in case you have a rough night. And I just always tell people that. And if you have a wonderful night's sleep, and most people do, then you know that valerian is your herb. And it's just wonderful. The root is medicinal. That's the part that is used. And you do have to let the plant grow 2 to 3 years before you harvest the roots, before they're mature enough. And the roots are stinky. The flowers are beautiful and they smell amazing. So it's just one of those fun plants that has, the different parts have different properties. Some people do use valerian leaves. I prefer just to use the root. And I just purchase it. I have valerian growing in our yard, and I actually did dig up a plant one time and I felt terrible. So I just purchased the valerian root from really good herb farms. And I suggest Pacific Botanicals or Foster Farms or Reverie Farms or Star West Botanicals. Okay, growing tips. Valerian is an exceptional pollinator. If you want bees in your yard, bees love these flowers. Let's see, it self-seeds pretty well. If you get a wind blowing and it gets the seeds blowing away, you might get some little plants springing up elsewhere. It also spreads by rhizomes. It likes full sun in the northern climates, and I have found that to be true. But when we were down south in Nevada in the mountains, it did handle shade really well. Not a lot of shade, but a little bit of afternoon shade really was helpful for it. It likes space because it's a pretty big plant. And you can grow it. You can start it from seed and then just direct seed it after the last frost if you're going to throw the seeds out. It likes moisture and it likes fertilized soil. So you kind of have to baby it a little bit. Next up is yarrow. This is Achillea millefolium. And this, oh my goodness, these are all my favorite plants. And I have many more, but I love yarrow. First off, it's pretty and it smells nice. And it also has essential oils and it has so many properties. Medicinally, yarrow is a vulnerary. It's very skin healing. If you get a wound, this used to be known as soldier's wort back in the Civil War days because the nurses in the field, they would take the yarrow plants and they would just pack them into the soldiers' wounds and it would stop the bleeding. So it's a very strong styptic or hemostatic herb. It's a wonderful plant to have on hand for fevers. It induces sweating. So what it does is it increases the internal temperature of the body, and that supports the fever process, especially if you've got one of those low-grade fevers that's just not ever like getting going and you want it to peak and it's just not. Yarrow would be your plant. So would elderflower, by the way, which we didn't talk about in this, but another really wonderful plant for that. Yarrow is really helpful for seasonal allergies, also for cold and flu. It tends to be drying and just kind of stops that misery, It helps with menstrual irregularities as well. It actually can bring on menstruation. And it's an emmenagogue herb, so you want to avoid it if you're pregnant. You don't want to be taking yarrow internally if you're pregnant. Growing tips. So yarrow these days, there's a lot of hybrids. It comes in a lot of different colors. It comes in red, it comes in pink, it comes in fuchsia, but the white and pink varieties are generally the best for medicinal properties. Wild yarrow is usually going to be white. It's very deer resistant, and you can easily start it indoors. It's a real easy keeper to get going. Plant seedlings about a foot apart. It's drought tolerant, so it does well if if you don't have a ton of water, and you can propagate it through root division or just start the seeds. It really does nicely in a lot of places, and it's a really pretty garden plant. All right. So, in conclusion, think about your family's needs when creating plant medicine. I'm going to go ahead and just stop my sharing here. I just want to say, in conclusion, that if you're interested in learning about using medicinal herbs or herbs that you can just grow in your garden for medicine, I highly suggest it. I think, in the homestead realm, a lot of attention is given to food prep and pantry preparation and supply. And we do all of that stuff, water and, solar, all of it, right? But guess what? Not too much attention is given to our health, and we need to think about that. And guess what? These medicinal herbs can literally do everything that can be done in an over-the-counter drug from the grocery store. You can, make your own cough remedies, your own antibiotics, your own skincare. I mean, it's crazy. You can literally think of anything you could buy in the drugstore. You can substitute it with a remedy made from plants you grow in your garden. Isn't that amazing? So I just want to suggest that when you get ready, and if you're a homesteader, you're likely to get ready. And if you're in the city and you can't really homestead, this is great. You can do herbalism anywhere. But join us in our next round of Ditch the Drugstore. You can actually join early if you want and get a head start. But I do open student rounds, and it's a lot of fun because you will plan out your home apothecary, what your family needs for your members, whether you have babies or whether you have elders or teenagers. And then you make medicine, and I teach you all of that. And then you put your apothecary together and you're set. So that's my course, Ditch the Drugstore. And I just encourage everybody to have a family herbalist available to them just in case. And it gives you more choices. All right, I'm Heidi Villegas. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Don't forget to get your free gift. I have one or two, if depending on what Audrey's going to put here. And I would love to have you join our community if you're ready to learn herbalism. All right, I will see you later. Visit healingharvesthomestead.com and you can find out everything there. Bye-bye.